Hello, hello, and welcome back to Ambitious. So today, I first feel like I need to apologize because in today's episode, will unpack why, but I feel like I've been approaching this entirely wrong. And for coming into this podcast, I truthfully feel like sometimes I get right into the meat of things because transparently, I don't feel comfortable with space. And in having some time, which I'm going to unpack why all of these downloads are happening, in having some time to really stew on things and the true way that I want to do business, I've realized that you and I have not had enough connection time. We have not had enough alone time together. And I have been approaching this like I have been on stage speaking to 100 people. And instead, I want to approach this moving forward with what is really happening, which is you and I hanging out for the next hour. And so I want to first start with a thank you for listening, for tuning in, for listening to the episodes. I get the messages from you guys every week of this resonated with me. Finally, someone talked about X. And I have just had the most incredible time being in my DMs, talking to people about the impact of the different topics and how it's happening on their life and different insights or takeaways that they can put into action. And it really was so eye-opening for me that I've really been approaching this totally wrong. And so I want to apologize. And I also want to give you a little insight as to kind of how we're going to be approaching Ambitious moving forward. Because we're still bringing all the insights, okay? We're still bringing all the strategy. We're still bringing all of the wisdom and the takeaways to you. I'm letting you in on the whole behind the curtain of everything. But the way in which I want to talk about it may be shifting and developing over time. And I wanted to start with that because I think it's important when you are a leader, a business owner, to also be able to share the fact that you're working through things and the fact that you're a work in progress. And I am not perfect, just like any other business owner is not perfect. And so it was just an insight and a download that I had. And I'm going to kind of share where all these downloads sparked from in today's episode because you know what? The simple of it is that I went to Montana and it changed my life. I started with a new mentor and I am going to have him come in for an episode so we can talk about our whole story of how we met. And there's also some business insights around how that developed that I want him to share with you. So I'm going to put a pin in it for now, but I hired a new mentor. And if you guys have heard me talk in other episodes about my journey, you probably know that I have been working up until this point. I've been in business for just over 5 years now. And I've been working with the same mentor for a long time. I've been working with basically one person, another man. Up until this point, I have been working with him the entire time. And that was incredible. And it served me in a very expansive and deep way because I really believe that mentorship is what coaching is about, not just strategy. It's not a matter of just getting somebody to give you a blueprint. I personally invest in people that I feel are going to change me as a person, and therefore in changing me as a person are going to help me to change my business. And I also really believe that coaching, in my opinion, is not this aspect of like 3 months or 6 months or whatever. I think that like any relationship, depth is something that's needed. And also in your business in general, expecting for transformation to basically happen overnight is just not a thing. And I know that a lot can happen in 3 to 6 months. But for me, when I signed with a mentor, and I literally said this to him when I just signed with him, I was like, hey, you're stuck with me because I know for a fact that I'm going to be working with him probably for the next couple years. And so when I go into that, I was going into this like a new relationship, just like I did with my last mentor. I was going into this being like, hey, I want depth. I want development. And so this was a very big decision for me because, as I said, I was with my last mentor for a long time. And as part of hiring this new mentor, he lives in Montana. And so he was like, hey, we kick off with an intensive. It's like a 3-day experience. Come to Montana. We'll do a deep dive on the business. And well, to say my brain got broken is an understatement because I learned so much. And when I said I took furious notes and I was like, I just can't wait to share this with you. I just want to give to you all of the things that I learned, all the downloads that I had. And so that's what we're talking about today. I literally, truthfully had 7 pages of notes. Like when I was prepping this for you, I was like, all right, what do I want to tell her? I want to tell her all the 7 pages of what I learned. So we're going to try to go through this in a quick-ish, but also streamlined, thorough fashion. If today's episode ends up being 90 minutes, take a break, come back to it. I am not going to chip away any of the value or remove anything from my notes because I was like, that is a disservice to you. And I would rather you chunk this into 2 long walks for yourself or 2 long car drives than me have to say, oh, we're not going to cover that, because all of this is absolute gold. So with that being said, let's get into the nitty gritty of it. I have this as a list, and you guys know I love a good list because number one, it really helps to break it into sections. And not to mention, if you, I don't know, have a notepad and pen, also makes it super easy for you to write down these concepts. One of the things that was so transformative about the week in Montana was the silence and the stillness. And this was such a principle for me to learn in business anyways, which was the fact that less is really more. Because I truthfully, when I landed, was like, it's too quiet here. This is not like Toronto. I'm out of here. Like I was so uncomfortable with the silence. I was so uncomfortable with the stillness for like the first 24 hours. And I think that this was an overarching principle that really helped me to also get downloads for the business as well. Because I think a lot of the time we have so much going on. We have so many, notifications and client messages and team messages and got to put up some marketing today and got to record a podcast and boom, 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 boom. And we don't really sit in what we're building. We don't sit in the vision. We don't sit enough away from the day-to-day noise to really get clarity of like what we're doing here and most importantly, how we're doing it. And so what I realized going to Montana was not only from a personal aspect was I not getting the space to really hear the downloads, but also in business, if you're too wrapped up in the day-to-day and you don't remove yourself from the environment, either mentally or physically, you will not get the space you need to have the clarity you're looking for. And I think so many business owners think that they're going to workshop their clarity. They're going to sit with more Google Docs and more Google Docs. And like, that's where the vision's going to come through. And truthfully, if I could be honest with you, that's not where your vision is. Your vision is you in the shower having a download because you have a moment of peace. Your vision is you on a hike in nature and being present and tuning into your environment. Your download is going to come from you being with family or hanging out with friends, talking about something totally unrelated and being like, oh my God, that's it. And so that's what happened in Montana. I had moments where I was doing the simplest and quietest of things. And, George says it much better than I, and I don't know what the line is perfectly, but he has this line that he said really impacted him. And it really sat with me, which was the fact that, his life and the way that he was operating was too loud to hear God's whispers. And that hit home for me because I think that for myself, there was so much that was trying to come through that I wasn't hearing about what I needed to do in business because truthfully, I was too distracted and I had way too much noise going on. I wasn't present. And so it's not that I didn't know what to do. It's not that I didn't feel clarity around it. It's like I couldn't hear the clarity. And so you may be in a place where you feel like, what is the next step? What am I supposed to do here? What do I do with the offer, the team, the marketing, whatever? It may not be a matter of you needing a strategy. It may be a matter of you needing some silence, you needing some time to step away. And so the takeaway for me was the fact that silence is sometimes truthfully where the biggest answers come through, not in you trying to workshop solutions, and realizing that sometimes to get the clarity that you want, I'm like, listen, George is amazing and blew my mind, which I'm going to get into all of the strategy. But truthfully, some of the transformation that I had while I was there for 7 days was not even in our sessions. It was outside the sessions where we were not doing strategy. And that's actually where I had a lot of transformation. And so I want to encourage you to ask yourself where you could take more silence. How much time do you have truly away from the business, the notifications, the cell phone, the social media? Like how intentional are you with taking that space? And could that be where your solution lies for what you're experiencing right now? The second thing that was a big, big download is the aspect of connection, because you guys know, like one of my first offers was Sweetheart Sales Society. And that basically is an offer that, I created with the belief that running a heart-centered business is the key to all the success that you want. Like really caring about people, leading from a place of empathy. If you guys know, I used to really have a deep interest in social work. And I thought that was what I was going to do for a career. And so when I came into doing business coaching, I was like, okay, well, this is definitely not social work. And so how do I integrate the care and the consideration of other people? into my work. And so connection has always been something at the forefront for me. But if I'm going to be transparent with you, I do think that I lost sight of the true width of what connection can look like. Because a lot of the time, for myself at least, I connect a lot with my team and I connect a lot with my clients. And that was kind of like case in point, closed door, that's it. And I think for myself, I realized that I wasn't really embracing the full principle of connection in all the ways that could impact my business. In every follower that I got, in every comment that I received, in every DM that I received, like every single interaction with another person is a place to plant a seed. And so I think, truthfully, I got a little bit caught up in the day-to-day of the business and the fact that everything felt fast-paced and like go, go, go. And so I really started to look, okay, like what is the definition of connection? Like I really sat with this and I realized that like the way that I've always felt such connection with people is when they've desired to connect with me in an aspect of curiosity. They have curiosity about me, my business, my life, my mindset, and they don't have an agenda. Okay, so connection, as I define it, is curiosity of an individual or another person without a personal agenda. And so the agenda portion is really important to me because I think a lot of the time we tell ourselves that we're like, oh, connection with my community, connection with my community. And I'm like, are you connecting with them because you want to connect with them? Or are you connecting with them because you're like, oh, I hope they buy? Or are you connecting with them in the DMs because you're like, they better close? I'm connecting with them in comments because you're like, I'm helping you because then if I help you, you better do boom, boom, boom and buy from me. Are we really connecting without an agenda? Are we connecting because it's really quite selfish? And so I think the biggest transformative mindset for me was this aspect of what can happen with connection, i.e. curiosity without an agenda, consistently over time. And I will tell you, and I listen, like I'm an open book. So also if you guys have questions about this, slide into my DMs. I'm happy to answer any questions about this. You know me, and I am all about, you guys know what I literally say all the time. It is the space between the thought and the action that makes successful entrepreneurs. So what did I do? I took these principles and I was like, okay, like I'm going to immediately, literally after day one, after day one, I started to integrate these. And I will tell you, just with that alone, have seen an increase in engagement in our socials. We haven't changed anything about our strategy. We are just going in with a different mindset and energy into every single dialogue and conversation that we have. I've seen an increase in engagement. I have seen more followers. I have seen more activated people on our lives asking questions. I have had more DMs than ever. I have more comments. I have had more sales with no new approach other than the energy of, hey, when I give to you, yeah, there's no expectation on anything ever. When I comment, it's because I'm commenting to care. When I DM, I'm DMing to care. When I, get on a call with you and you're interested in an offer, I'm just here to help you. And I think it was, for me, always the way that I approached it, but I kind of secretly, I think at a very, very deep level, kind of had an agenda. I had this aspect of expectation. And I'm like, why do I have that? How is that hindering us? And so when I removed that, it was like a switch went off. Even our team was like, what's happening? And I'm like, yeah, people are feeling like they're in all these places on the internet where there is no connection. And now that they actually feel any aspect of intimacy with someone they follow, they're like, whoa, this feels different. And so I think the aspect of connection was such a big download for me because it made me realize the ways in which so many of us are connecting with an agenda. And so I want to invite you to ask yourself, how could you go into the relationships that you have either with your clients, with your team, with your audience in a way that is not so transactional, that is not so your agenda and what you're looking to see happen? Another thing that was really kind of, again, in connection to relationships and the depth of connection was boundaries. And so we're going to have George on the podcast soon. So I'm going to let him dive into the strategy of it all and also the essence and the principles of all of it because he talks about it 10 times better than I ever will. But one thing that I really was kind of shaken up about, and I remember saying this to him, bless his heart, but I said, you're a little off-putting to me. And I'm like, I can't believe I said that. But literally, I think it, I feel it, I say it. So I said, listen, you're a little bit off-putting to me. And he was like, why? And I'm like, because you're so like bleh. He's so like word vomits his whole life onto you. Like he will share everything. He has no boundaries. Like he is who he is. He's so authentically himself and doesn't have a facade. He doesn't have this like covering over him protecting him from relationships with other people. Like he is genuinely the way he is with his son, with his family, with his clients, with his friends. Like he just is who he is all the time. And there's no boundary. There's no, hey, I only share XYZ because you're my client. And it literally felt within 24 hours of us being together, like he treats everybody like family. And I was like, whoa, this is so different than anything I've ever seen. Because what do we know? We know that when people obviously coach in business coaching a lot of the time, and even with client interactions in general, there's this aspect of like, we want to make sure that we have a boundary. We want to make sure that we have a line between us. Like I do and don't share this, and I'm not available for this, and I can only talk about this. And, that's too personal. And so it really hit home with me seeing him embody this leadership of being entirely authentic and transparent about absolutely everything. And what I've realized was, number one, it created a safe space for me to share. Like the depth of connection that I felt in 24 hours versus, what I'm sure many feel when it comes to mentorship is like, we're here to only talk about X. Like maybe even you thought you want to talk to your mentor about something, or you want to talk to someone in business about something, but you're like, oh, I don't know if that's professional, if it's appropriate. And having all that thrown out the window and being like, hey, if you think it or if you feel it, just say it, was such a permission slip to just truly unleash all of who you are. And so I started to really reflect on this. A lot of the notes I have today, guys, I did on the plane, truthfully, because I was kind of like download. And, I started to think about how boundaries that we pre-create, by the way, these are created and enforced by us. How are those boundaries actually helping us? Because I thought about if we had that boundary when I was there, and if you have that boundary with your clients, how is that potentially impacting the way or the depth that you're able to create transformation for them? And also, why are we not allowed to share that? Like, why is sharing a life experience or sharing a trauma considered unprofessional when, newsflash, all of us are going through it? We're all human. We all have these emotions and fears and struggles and thoughts and patterns. And I think the idea that hiring a mentor means that they don't have that is kind of ridiculous when you think about it. It's part of why we feel so connected to people. And so I started to ask myself, is this kind of BS of boundaries needed for clients actually something that is blocking the true depth of transformation that is possible to be achieved? Because I think that if I had my guard up, i.e., if I had been trying to respect the boundary, there's a lot that would not have happened, a lot of breakthroughs that could not have occurred because I wouldn't have felt safe to do so. And so that all started with him creating a safe space by being like, hey, yeah, I have my shit too. I have this, and saying it with such openness and safety and confidence. And, for myself, it really made me come home and realize that I am not embracing enough of the intimacy with my clients in the depth of the personal, because for me, I was like, there's personal and professional. And so I started to, ask myself, how can I let my clients a lot more into my world? And literally I came back from my trip and I had, shared things with my clients that I have never shared. I put things in a Slack channel that I've never put in my entire life. And can I just say, the response from the most incredible women, like people reaching out, and it was my deepest fear. It made me so uncomfortable to do that. But again, like I really believe between the thought and the action, like go, in the sense of the fastest way you can implement it is the way that you're going to really integrate what you're thinking or considering and put it into words and put into action. And the response was such a confirmation of that work, of that lack of boundaries and the impact of what that can be, because the response from the clients was just like profound, and people saying, thank you for being human. Thank you for sharing that you're struggling with things. Thank you for being open with us. Because I think that this aspect of like being an authority, and George and I have chatted about this briefly, but this aspect of being an authority is not a sense of being perfect. It's a sense of leadership. And part of leadership is the fact that you're not perfect, because no leader is. And so leaders lead from the front. And so I started to ask myself, how am I leading opportunity for them to be vulnerable and them to share when I'm not even doing that? And so I'm like, lead by example, be this, and break down the boundary. And can I just say, like, it has created such a beautiful invitation for our clients to connect. And, I'm still exploring what all this looks like to me, because obviously this is new. I've been home only for a couple weeks now, but I think, I'm really excited to redefine the boundaries of coaching, because I think that there's a possibility that the way that we've been dividing the personal and professional has actually been hindering us more than it may be helping us. So I may circle back in another episode about that because there's lots to unpack there. And this kind of, dominoes a little bit as well into a thought that I had about, how much we need to know to help somebody. And the analogy that I thought about was the fact that when our clients have guards up, or when people are really focused on that boundary, they're not sharing all the information. And so I thought about it like going to a doctor. Like if you went to a doctor and they're trying to help to diagnose you and they're trying to give you, as a result, the medication that you need to get better, which is really what coaches do. When you go into that and you're only sharing some of the symptoms or you're only sharing some of the experience, and they're like, oh yeah, okay, can you give me medication on it? Number one, they may not be able to diagnose effectively. And number two, because they can't diagnose effectively, they can't give you a solution properly. They can't give you the proper medication because they don't actually know what's going on. And so I think the boundary aspect to kind of close that loop made me realize that maybe we are not actually serving clients in the way that we could or need to, simply based off the fact that we can't diagnose properly and we can't give the medication properly. And that all comes from the fact that we're not truly open with our clients, which causes them at times to not be truly open with us. So I think we need to redefine and come back to the boundary conversation. I'm going to stew on it a little bit because this is all fairly fresh, but I want to make sure that I share that as just something for you to consider with your clients and maybe how you could lead more by example to show up as an authority, but from the lens of not being perfect, but from leading with integrity and the values that you want your clients to have with yourself. Another download that really was helpful was also the fact that just because something is working does not mean that it is for you. And I've seen this when I've gone to events. I've talked to people who are having a lot of success. Like we're talking like 200, 300, 400,000 a month. And there's things in business that do work, i.e. they get you followers, they get you press, they get you money, whatever you want to call it. And I think a lot of the time in business, we can sometimes associate that because it works, i.e. it gets us an outcome, that means that just ultimately is what we're supposed to do or what we in turn keep as our own. And in this process of this week, I analyzed every section of our business. There was there was no stone unturned. We went through every single area and department. And what I realized was there were certain sections that, while wildly successful and really are part of what allowed us to get to multiple seven figures, and I'm grateful for that, there's also this aspect of just because it works doesn't mean it works for me. Okay. So my motto, just because it works doesn't mean it works for me. And I think that this unlocked a lot of conversations that we had during the week because we were talking about the fact of the one blueprint and the one 5-step model and follow what I do. And listen, you guys know my thoughts about that. I'm not into it. And I realized that there were certain situations that I was falling into that I wasn't in my business being critical enough to say, even though it's getting us success, is this the way in which, or the process in which I want to achieve that success? Does it feel good? Even though it feels good to get the outcome, does the process feel good? And I think that I was so focused on, get to the outcome, that I didn't really stop to assess, do I want to get to the outcome in this way? And does this, shoe feel like it fits me? And truthfully, there was some areas that I was like, no, it's getting me the outcome, but it feels a little icky, or it feels like it's something that doesn't quite fit just yet. And it feels a little bit unfinished. And I realized that, something can make you $5 million, but still feel really in your soul as a business owner wrong. And so I also, in this moment, started to kind of unpack what were other areas that I may have been doing things because they were effective or a sense of getting us the outcome, but were not actually something that I was aligned to. And so I started to literally audit my entire business. And that became my checklist, which was listen, there's a million and one ways to be successful. There's a million and one ways to get to the outcome that you want. The question is really the process of how you want to do it. And if I know anything to be true about business, it's the fact that there are a million and one pathways to the same destination. And so I think for myself, I've always kind of felt this way. But again, never felt this permission slip to really be vocal about it. And I talk about it behind closed doors for years now, but it frustrates me that so many people will be like, my blueprint, my process, my this, that, or the other. And that's because I don't think that business is that simple. I heard on a podcast recently, no two clients that are fitness clients have the exact same workout routine. No two clients have the exact same plan. No two businesses are completely identical. And so why are we forcing businesses to do that in the online world of, this is my process, you become it? And also, how is that actually hindering us in a really intense way? And when I started to unpack it with our conversations, we realized that, the way that I kind of vocalized it was that having these blueprints, while people think, oh, it helps me to give me confidence, you know exactly what to do, follow my steps. The thing that you may not be considering is the fact that it's also causing you to not think. It's causing you to not develop. It's causing you to not have the critical thinking skills that you need as a business owner to make the decisions, because they're basically being made for you. And so then we want to think down the line when you don't have that coach, or the next part of the blueprint hasn't been developed yet, or you actually have to, God forbid, think on your own 2 feet. I have seen this firsthand in conversations with people who are like, I don't know what to do. I don't trust myself. Is it this or is it that? Is it this or that? And people become paralyzed with fear around making the right or wrong decision. And that ultimately is because they've never worked with someone who actually allowed them to trust themselves, who actually allowed them to say, hey, let me teach you who to be. Let me teach you how to develop to become the person that you need to be to get the outcome you want, not teach you just, hey, do this, do that, and that's going to get you where you want to go. And, the line that was shared during the week was the fact that, really, unfortunately, bad coaches give their clients fish. Really good coaches teach them how to fish. And so that analogy for me was like, how are we actually creating codependency with our clients? How are we actually potentially hindering and literally, capping our clients' success by putting them in this box? We're not empowering them. We're not trying to say, hey, here's how we're going to help you to choose. Here's how we're going to help you to know. Here's how we're going to help you to build confidence. We're just saying, hey, be me. And how is that really helping? It's really, when we really get to the crux of it, only helping the mentor who's coaching. Why? Because you've now become part of this McDonald's production line of the same burger, same, Starbucks latte that's a recipe. There's no customization, there's no individualization to it. And so the question becomes, is that really what we want to summarize business to be? And so for me, it really helps me to get the permission slip going through it this week and analyzing my own business to realize, I have done a lot of customization. There were still some places where I didn't feel that I was completely authentically myself, and we are changing those. But there were so many aspects where I knew what others did, and they went left, and I was like, great, if that's left, I want to go right, because I didn't want to do the same thing. It was not a blueprint or, an outline that really resonated with me. And so when I started to unpack that this week, I just realized that this is something that I want to talk more about, because there's so many people who feel this way. There's so many people who show this belief. And I also think that you maybe have even invested in a mentor or invested into a course where you haven't been given, independence or autonomy to really figure out who you are and how you want to do it. And instead it's been a blueprint. And if that's capping you, I want to make sure you have resources to overcome that. Another one that was a big download for me was brand buckets versus brand pillars, because a lot of my business until a certain point, I've been operating off of brand pillars. So brand pillars, just to kind of, summarize it quickly, is really the categories of which you talk about certain types of content or marketing that allow your audience to really easily identify what it is that you stand for, what you talk about, and what they can get from you if they consistently follow you or digest what you're marketing. And so I had, I think at the time, 6 or 7 that I was covering. And I realized, in our work together, one of the big downloads that I had was from a brand perspective. My audience can't remember the 7 things that Kate stands for. While I would love, even myself, to know the 7 things that someone stands for, oftentimes our brain can only remember 3. And so this kind of across the board in multiple different aspects is true. And so then it came back to, okay, well, how do I summarize what I do into 3 core categories? And so here's the 3 that I landed on. Number 1 being the person, the individual, the CEO, the personal development, the leader behind the company is one thing that I'm always talking about. So that's bucket number 1. Number 2, I previously used to talk about marketing, sales, offers, all of those things. And I was like, well, what is really the essence of what all that talks about? All of that, its basic essence, is just talking about the pipeline of how someone gets someone from interested into being a client into serving them. And so then bucket number 2 became pipeline. So that was our second creation. And then the third, which I talk about a lot, is community. I talk about giving. I talk about brand. I talk about all of these things. And so for myself, I was like, well, how do I kind of pour that into an essence of, there's so much that I want to unpack with that. And that became your people. And so my 3 Ps now being talking about the person, talking about the pipeline, and talking about people. And so now going into content and marketing production, the number one thing that we're going to be focusing on is really making sure that that is the kind of, I would say, benchmark of all the marketing that we make. So for example, if we're on a podcast like this, if we are, doing stories, if we're putting up posts on our feed, we want to ensure that we have variety amongst those three pillars. And so something that may be helpful for you is to say, what are the three big themes of something that you talk about? And how can you theme all the ideas? This is, by the way, not to say that you don't talk about all the ideas. We're just categorizing them into three core buckets so that instead of you being like, why 14 things that I discuss? If you have three core buckets of things that you talk about, they're very easy to structure into your marketing, and also in turn, very easy for your audience to tune into and to understand as well. And so we realize that, to really deepen our brand message and to deepen our brand mission, we need to make it super easy for people to know who we are, what we talk about, and what we stand for. And so the way to do that was by creating these three buckets and making it much simpler for our audience to understand. When you follow us, when you stand with us, when you listen to us like today, this is what you stand for and this is what you're listening for. And so that was also really helpful to really consolidate all the topics and all of the things that I wanted to talk about and really put them into like one concise fashion. In the same tone of brand, we did a lot of work around our brand and our brand mission and our values and what we stand for. And I think a lot of it, truthfully, we already had very messy because I'm pretty vocal about what I believe and, what I stand for and what I'm against. But I think that the aspect that I was missing the market in our marketing specifically was the fact that, and you may resonate with this as well, we were talking about what we believe and to be true in the sense of what we believe to be like, yes, this is the way, and also what we're totally against. But we weren't really giving depth into lenses. And this was the download that was really helpful. So first you want to start with, what do you stand for and what do you stand against? So that's like the stage one that was helpful for us, really getting an intentional exercise to brain dump all of that and get that pen to paper to say, listen, like this is, you might think, well, I don't know, I just talk about it. And it's like, listen, girl, same. These are just things that I would naturally, express in a podcast or whatever it might be, but actually getting intentional to document those so you can be intentional about how you put them into marketing was really, really helpful. And so I think taking step one to really ask yourself, what do we stand for and what do we stand against? But the second lens of that was the question of why. So why do you stand for it or why do you stand against it? And giving context to you specifically. So like you as a brand, if you think about yourself and you as an individual, why do you believe that to be true? What is the impact of it? What is the essence of why that's your truth? And actually giving context to that. Maybe it's with a description of it. Maybe it's with a story of something you've experienced, whatever it may be. Give context to why you specifically as a brand believe that to be true. Now, the other thing that was also the next layer of that, though, was the fact that, okay, great, we've got, why I believe that to be true, but then also, why should my client or why should my customer or why should my audience believe that to be true? And that question really was where we were missing the mark, because I was very vocal about what I believe and why I believe it. But the last leg of that, which was why should my audience believe that to be true, is really what I think I was missing the mark on, which maybe is why it wasn't downloading or resonating with our audience as deep as it could be, because I needed to give more context. So let's say, for example, as I talked about the blueprint, I don't believe in blueprints. I don't believe in your 5-step method is the way to everyone's success. So I talk about why, but then I also need to talk about, well, why is that something that's hindering your success? How is that taking away your independence? How is it not allowing you to have confidence? How is that confidence showing up in other areas of your business? Like, I really need to connect the dots as to not only what it is and why I believe it, but also most importantly, why you should care, i.e., how it impacts you and your business as a listener. And so for yourself as an exercise, you can go through what it is that you believe to be true, i.e., like I'm pro this, I'm con this, step one. Step two, why do you believe that to be true? So what is the essence of that? Either give us some more depth or tell a story around it as to, how that came to be as your belief. And then from there, going into why is that something that your clients should believe to be true? Or how is this impactful for them? Either how is it going to help them if they mastered it, or how is it hindering them if they continued it? And so that exercise was extremely helpful for me to just really get pen to paper on all of the things that really were the basis of what we stood for. And actually seeing that on paper was so helpful as a visual exercise to be like, okay, great. How do we plant this in more podcasts, put it in more stories, put it in, posts, put it everywhere? Because it's when you do that, that you have all these seeds that when someone finds you on a podcast or on social media, that they're getting the same touch point everywhere. The two words that stuck out to me throughout the entire week, if you want to write these down, are consistency and congruency. And I think that they're just such simple descriptions, but they are so wildly effective as an assessment for your business, because how consistent and congruent are you amongst your entire business? And there's a lot of lenses of how you could look at consistency, and there's a lot of ways that you could look at congruency. But I think for myself, I realized that I was lacking congruency amongst our different socials. And I also was at times lacking consistency of the same message over and over and over again. And so that exercise is going to be super helpful for you to start to get clarity of what that is, so that you can intentionally integrate it. And with that, I also really had this download of the principle of just because you have it or you know it does not mean it's integrated. Like when we did that exercise around the values and creating the mission and all of the things, and really how to create a movement with your audience, what came through was the fact that I had all of these things sitting in a Google Drive. Like he was like, so like, tell me your values. And I'm like, okay, I've got this doc and I've got this doc. It's not that I didn't know what I stood for. And probably it's not that you don't know. It's not that you don't have that clarity. It's a matter of the fact that just because you know doesn't mean it's integrated into the business. And so the idea of simply doing something to check a box versus that thing you have actually creating impact in the business is the difference of its success, i.e., you having Google Docs of ideas and plans and value statements and mission statements for your business, but never taking that mission and putting it into your social media means it's entirely useless. If it's not integrated, it serves no purpose. I feel like I have all the one-liners. I have a doc of them somewhere. They were so good. I'm going to mess it up. I will circle back and make sure when George is on, he shares it. But a student says, thanks for the lesson, and a master says, thanks for the reminder. It was something along that line. And this was the essence of that. It was the fact that, hey, I needed the reminder that, it's sitting in your Google Doc is not helping your business. It's sitting in your notes on your phone is not helping your business. It's sitting in your journal is not helping your business. And I started to say, like, to myself, what are the ways of which I've been doing the process but not going deep enough to really integrate it into the business? And so, hearing the whole idea of a student says, thanks for the insider lesson, and a master says, thanks for the reminder, a lot of this week was the reminder that I needed. It was not a matter of like, there was some things definitely that were completely brand new to me. And I was like, yes, because the strategy was so good. But there was also a lot of things that were just reminders that I needed. And I think that we underestimate the power of those reminders, because we constantly think that we need to hire somebody for this like massive new blueprint of, strategy and things that I've never seen before. And, what we know in any area is it's not the knowing, it's the doing. It's not knowing to go to the gym. It's actually going to the gym. So for me, it was not a matter of having things or knowing things. It was a matter of truly doing them. And so for myself, when I started to realize I had these Google Docs of values and mission statements and all of these things, it became very apparent that, I really needed to put more focus and practice into the fact of just having it not being enough, and instead having it integrated being the model of success or the metric of success. We also did, during our time, talk about signature frameworks. So signature frameworks, if you're not familiar with them, or, another way that this can be structured much more intentionally is called a genius model. We had a signature framework coming into this, which was basically our principles and process of how we get clients results and the framework that we use to do that. And so they really were a bunch of different stages that we had developed, and we broke all of them down. And like, I've been using this now, the same model for like 5 years. Okay. So I came in with this model. And one thing I felt truthfully at that time, really confident in it. Like I was like, this is perfect. I am not touching it. Like it's great. It's been the crux of everything that we've done for the last like 5 years. It's perfect. That was my mistake. And again, a good reminder. You just don't know what you don't know. And when you're not open and receptive to change, you really are going to miss out on something truly incredible, as I almost did if I had not been receptive to some of the insights or wisdom of this change. And so, the reason, by the way, that I was resistant is because that framework is literally everywhere. It's in PDFs. It's on our website. It's everywhere. And I remember when he was like, hey, I said, no. we are not touching that. No, I can't handle it if I have to change that. Like, that's going to be such a big project. And it was his obviously lovely, like, tough love of like, hey, let's just sit with it and look at it, and we'll just, go from there and see how it goes. I'm like, okay. So we unpacked it, and thank God we did, because I, with this model, realized that the pillars that we teach, they haven't changed in the sense of like the framework we're going to be teaching versus what we used to teach has not changed. But the way in which we talk about it will change. And that's because we realized that the name and the way we structured our framework used to be attract, convert, deliver. So that's the 3 ways we used to talk about it. And what we realized was that, again, a little bit back to brand, it really wasn't encompassing the essence of who we were and what we believed to be true. And so even though, yes, it's very obvious, attract your leads, convert them, and deliver to them, like it's very case in point, we realized, number one, it's extremely similar to so many different other people in the industry. Like everyone is convert and connect and warm and deliver or expand or whatever. And so we had 5 steps previously. We took those 5 steps and we consolidated those into 3 steps. And when we consolidated those into 3 steps, we also changed the name of them. And so previously we used to have attract, convert, deliver. And now we've switched it from attract to become intention, i.e. intention in your marketing, being intentional about you as a brand, intention that you set out with your marketing, who you want to bring in, the intentional ways in which you market. It's all about bringing in that perfect intentional client into your world and building an intentional brand. Convert used to be all about sales. And so instead, I was like, well, what do I believe to be true about sales? I believe that sales is an invitation. I think sales is an opportunity for someone to get help. It is not persuasion. It is not push. It is not convincing. It is simply an invitation. And if the person says no to coming to the party, that's totally okay. It was just an invitation. If you can't make it, you can't make it. Or if this is not the right fit for you, totally okay. So we switched conversion into invitation because that's really what I believe to be true about sales. And third, we really thought of, okay, the delivery aspect. Like, it was a matter of really integrating your values and integrating your knowing into your business in the way you serve clients and the way you sell behind the scenes of renewals and upsells and your team, all of those things. And so instead of attract, convert, deliver, we now have our framework, which is intention, invitation, and integration. And so it really not only was better to go from these kind of more, I would say, generic words into more brand purpose-driven words, but it also, in that discussion of that, helped us to really get clarity of the true essence of what we're doing and the better ways in which we can communicate that to people that are not really about the logistics of what we're doing, but more the intention or principles we're helping them to master. And so I think number one is to ask yourself, do you have a signature framework? Do you have a genius model? And if you don't, considering going back to that and saying, like, how can I go back to the drawing board and really try to get clarity on this to ensure that not only do I have clarity, but also I can transfer that clarity to my clients to make sure that they really get the essence of not only what we're going to do, but also, who we are. And that's really your model, your framework in business, again, is not a blueprint. Frameworks in business are about the fact that you have, the way that I kind of describe it is you have like almost like the commandments, like you have principles. And so those principles teach people how to think. And when you teach them how to think, they know how to act. And so that really is what your signature framework should be intending to do, or your genius model should be intending to do. Okay, I'm going to run through this one a little quick, but I had to share it because it was just golden nuggets the whole way through. You guys know that the whole basis of my entire business has been built off of social media and organic marketing. I've never done an ad. I've only done it through social media. And because of that, I was like, okay, how do I share as much of this as humanly possible? And so I'm going to give you our production pipeline, and I'm going to go through it step by step because some of this is going to be helpful for you if you want to kind of note this down. So I would suggest at this moment, if you want to pause, get a paper and pen, get on your notes on your phone, and get some notes and write this down. Okay, so the 8 steps, this is basically, we did our day together, and I love a good framework. Like, literally, it's how my brain works. And so because of that, I noted down all of this and was like, this is the framework I'm going to be using now. So first, we're going to pick a core bucket. Remember, we talked about pipeline, person, and our people. We picked 3 core buckets of the topics we talk about, and those have tons of topics underneath them. We want to pick a bucket first. That was like step 1 to me. Pick a bucket when you're going into making content. 2, you want to pick a person. So like for myself, I have 2 different stages of businesses that I help. I have the earlier stage and I have the secondary stage. So if you have different offers, there may be different people associated with those. So you want to really get clarity of like, who am I really trying to speak to right now? That's step 2. Step 3, you're then going to pick a pathway, which for us is where we really look to say, okay, is this a post that we're looking to have that is like a selling post? Is this just to give? Is it to create community engagement? Like, what is the intention or the marketing initiative around the post? That's another aspect of clarity. Why do we care about what we're talking about? And is that integrated in the post? Remember, we were talking a little bit about brand and what we care about and what we believe to be true. There's two sides here. So you want to look at why you care about it and why is this an internal belief for you? Make sure that's in the post somewhere and communicated. And also make sure that there's somewhere in the post that's being communicated as to how it impacts them in the sense of a positive way or a negative way. One additional aspect is adding in scripture statements. So scripture statements are something that I learned from George, and it was really, at its basic essence, the brand statements that you say. You know, if you guys think about Ellen DeGeneres, she would sign off on her show every day and say, have a great day, everybody. And I think she said, like, make sure you love everybody or something like that. So she would end every single show with love. And it's really a statement that she said consistently that everyone would know to be associated with her and with her show. And so you can actually have the same thing. You can have a spreadsheet of a document of all the different one-liners that you say consistently. And so then what ends up happening is when you put those consistently and congruently in your marketing, you will have people start to know what those statements are and really help to really integrate your brand beliefs into your audience. And so you could also have the extra stage of adding in a scripture statement. After that, we then go into, okay, well, how do we want to deliver this? Do we want to do it through a carousel? Do we want to put it on a story? Do we want to put it in TikTok? And then most importantly, we are looking to assess the data. And so obviously there's steps underneath each of these in the sense of like strategy elements underneath it. But really, at its basic essence, we are picking a core bucket of what we want to talk about. We're picking a person we want to speak to. We are picking a pathway of what the intention is of what we want. Do we want engagement, selling, activating people, whatever it may be? We want to talk about why we care about it and also why our audience should care about it. Maybe adding in some scripture statements if we can along the way. And then we're going to pick a delivery method of what kind of post it's going to be and make sure to always assess the data before going into more. And so I think that this really helped to give us almost like a checklist, if you will, when we're going into marketing to say, are we hitting it from all sides? Because marketing, or content or however you feel like it resonates with you is not just about posting. There's a lot of things happening in posts. There's community building, there's brand building, there's helping people along the customer journey, there's activating people and giving them invitations to buy. Like, there's so much that can go into posts. There's buyer psychology. There's just a lot that can happen in marketing. And so having an intention, having a checklist, if you will, of the different notes that you want to hit in your marketing allows you to ensure that all those things are happening, that you are building community and that you are building brand and that you are building all of these things and that you're also doing so with intention. And so I want to quickly go through that. There's a lot more depth that I could go into, and you guys can let me know in the comments if you feel like I should do a separate episode on that entirely, because I'm more than happy to. But that was super helpful for me to really give me that internal checklist of what we're going to be doing in the marketing, and also might be helpful for you to kind of start to workshop and brainstorm. All right. This next one was a game changer. It was a game changer for me because obviously with our team, I work with a lot of powerful, incredible women. But because we are powerful and incredible, we all have different ways in which we operate. And we were talking a little bit about team. We were talking about leadership and this concept of the 3 different types of avatars came up. And so I'm going to break them down really quickly, but I want to have George come on and come back and talk about this because it's just something that I feel like makes the most sense now. And the way that I want to almost describe this is buyer psychology is kind of like the equivalent of like the love language of how your audience buys from you. And the love language is really how you want to be communicated to or, loved and the way in which you express it. And so this is kind of the equivalent for business and for the teams. And so we started talking about the fact of how I communicate in conversations and how I problem solve and how my team problem solves. What is their natural response to things? Are they typically pretty optimistic per person? Are they typically pretty, they find all the things that won't work? What's their typical operating style? And so we started to unpack that. And so it became very apparent that the way we were brainstorming things or having team discussions may have actually been negatively being impacted by the fact that we weren't considerate of, all different styles of how people learn and how they digest. And so what we ended up doing was unpacking the 3 different styles. I'm going to break them down for you. So first one being the dreamer. And so the motto of the dreamer is really outlining what you want to have happen. The thing with the dreamer, and when you're in the dreamer state, it's kind of like 3 states of being in conversation, is that you can't ask how about the conversation and you can't poke holes. You can't be a, negative Nancy, if you will, in the conversations. You're looking to really play to the dream, to the possibilities, talk about goals, talk about outcomes, really focusing on what can work and all of the things that could be. And so that's state number 1 and also avatar 1. I am very much that person. I stay in dream state basically all the time because for myself, it's really helped me to ensure that I'm always looking at the possibilities, glass half full. But you also have to consider when we do this, are we missing out on other sides, which is very possible. The second one that we've got is the builder, which is it's less of just the dream and it's more about the how. So the goal with the builder is that they want to look at how can we actually accomplish the dream. This is the people that when you're in a meeting, by the way, will be like, okay, well, what about this and what about that? They're planners, okay? So the rules is the fact that you cannot add or take away from the dream and you can't poke holes. You can't be critical and you can't go into the dream. You're all about the plan and the how, okay? The last one being the protector, which is the person who protects the dream. And you can't add or take away from the dreamer or the builder. You're instead there to really be the person who can talk about how it could go wrong. And so again, want to go back through the dreamer is the dream state. Their goal is to talk about the dream, the outcome, or the goals that they're going for. 2, you've got the builder state, which is the fact that they want to talk about how the dream can be accomplished and the process of which or how you're going to do it. And 3rd is the protector, which is the person who's going to think about all the ways in which it could go wrong. And so the insight for me around this was the fact that there was so many times in conversations, even if you want to think about this with clients, not necessarily with your team, and even truthfully in your relationships with friends, partners, whoever it may be, asking yourself, are you always the critical one? Are you always the protector? Are you always the builder? And you're never staying in the dream state and you're only thinking about the how. And because of that, it, closes the conversation off. Maybe you're like me and you hang out in the dream state a little bit and you could really benefit from trying out a different state or trying out a different avatar to really flex that muscle of looking at, the things that could go wrong and having an awareness of that. And so I think that this model for me was really helpful to really look at the different buckets of who we can be and also looking at how you can intentionally interchange those. We all have a natural operating style with these 3 types, but I think challenging our team to really play within those and in your relationships to play in those allows you such an opportunity to expand and to develop in a totally different way of operating than you might traditionally do. Now, one of the things that I also went through was a model of decision making because there's a decision making matrix, which is like delegate it, do it now. And there's 4 different quadrants. And so that's really a lot of a model that I've been using. I think it's called the Eisenhower matrix. That's what I think it is. I think it's the Eisenhower matrix. And so that's a matrix that I've been using for a long time to make decisions. And so when we talked a little bit about decision making around leadership, I was given these 4 categories of ways to actually assess a plan of action of what you're going to be working on and in what order you should do it. So one of them is asking yourself when you have all these things you need to do, what is the impact of the action that you're considering taking? So really getting an understanding of that. 2, how confident are you that this is going to work? So assessing the confidence level of the action or the concept or idea you're considering. 3, how easy is it to test, develop, or launch? I.e., based on time, how easy is it to test, develop, or launch? How quickly could you get something whipped together if you wanted to press go on it? And lastly, how resource intensive is this in the economics of things? How much is this going to take from you? And so when you look at the impact of the goal or the impact of the action, you look at the confidence that you need to achieve it in the sense of how confident are you that it's going to generate something for you, the ease of it and the economics of it. You start to realize, we ran through a couple different situations with my business, it becomes extremely apparent what you need to do. And so really, what ended up happening was you would go through each of these on a scale of 1 to 10 and you would give it a score. And so if you were like 1 being low, 10 being high, you would say that's a 7, that's a 5. And by the end of it, you would tally all of it up and you'd give yourself a score. So you could give yourself like 10 different ideas that you have right now. And you could literally create a table and it would say impact, confidence, ease, and economics. And underneath each one, you would have scores of all of it. And then you'd have a column at the end that would tally each one of those tasks up. And so then you would look at, well, what is the thing that actually is going to be taking the most from you? And again, does that make sense as the right next step for you of something to put into action? So it was just a very simple but streamlined model that helped to really quantify things that were a little bit more abstract, right? Like this was very logistical about this is exactly how you know how to make a decision and if this is the right next move for you. And so it was less of a personal assessment and more of almost an equation, which was really helpful because it allows also, by the way, anybody on your team to be able to run through this as well for you. The other motto that was also very much again a reminder was that scale comes from subtraction and not addition. And, I often talk in our marketing about streamlining and optimization and talking about all of the fact that when people come to me, they really think like, oh, I need a new offer and I need a new this or new that. And I'm like, no, you don't. Like, you don't need more stuff. You don't need to do more things. What you need to be doing is actually looking at the little tiny tweaks of the things that are not working and optimizing those. And I think the idea of scale comes from subtraction, not addition, was really a matter of like removing the complicated nature of things, removing the fact that you need 18 steps before you launch the webinar, removing the fact that to get that offer up, you need 6 months to develop it. Like really looking at, are we adding fluff? Are we adding this buffer into everything that we do? And is that actually potentially causing us to slow down or hindering our development? And the other, motto kind of in connection to that as well of like another one-liner that was really helpful was that scaling comes from retention and not acquisition. And so I think a lot of the time, again, it was a good reminder because so many businesses that I talk to will say like, we need more leads, we need more leads. And, frankly, I said to people, if I threw 200 leads at you, first of all, could you serve them? And number two, if you did serve them, would they stay? And so if you have a revolving door of clients, people come and go, and you've got no retention, then yeah, you're going to have an uphill battle scaling your business because you constantly need new people every single day. Because if you don't, they're not staying, they're not renewing. So the customer is only spending or investing, let's say 5,000, when some other people who have better retention, they have people spending 20,000 because they're staying longer, because they're happy, because they're getting results, because they're getting the relationship that they want with the person they're working with. And so I think that was also just a really good one-liner I want to be sure to share with you because I think these are the thing that, again, the reason I say one-liner, these are also, by the way, scripture statements. These are brand statements that I got from the week, was the fact that they're one-liners that really help to summarize the essence of the principle. And so even if you don't remember anything that I just said, you can remember scale comes from subtraction, not addition, right? Or if you don't remember anything else that I just said, you may remember scaling comes from retention, not acquisition. And so those are lines that you can write down so that when you have those in a journal, in a notebook, in a Google Doc, you have a reference to what the principle is in a very clear and concise and summarized way. The other one line that I want to give you, which this one, I feel like I'm using it every day now. It's just so true, is that your message is only as effective as your recipient's ability to hear it, understand it, and implement it, most importantly, without you. I'm going to say it one more time. Your message is only as effective as your recipient's ability to hear it, understand it, and implement it without you. This one was everything because it translates to everything. It translates to people upset that their clients are not taking the action or downloading something that they need. They're not implementing or integrating something the way that they want them to. And I'm like, because you haven't communicated it in the way that they need to see it. It's also reflective of relationships. I saw this with parenting and the fact that you can say something one way. It doesn't mean that your child heard it, understood it, or can do anything about it yet because they didn't digest it. Even though you said it doesn't mean they digested it. The same thing when it comes to relationships or partnerships. Just because you are saying it to your partner and you're like, oh, I said it. And it's like, yeah, but it doesn't mean they integrated it. Doesn't mean they understood it. Doesn't mean that they can handle it. Or your team members. You're like, I told so-and-so to do such and such. And it's like, great. Tell her again 50 more times until she gets it because clearly she wasn't able to understand it or integrate it. And so I think the reason I love that line, I love it. Your message is only as effective as your recipient's ability to hear it, understand it, and implement it without you. It's just such an essence of everything. And it really helps us to reframe our message and what the understanding or integrating of that message really looks like and how easily that may or may not be understood, and recognizing that that's kind of part of the process. That's your job, is to make sure that people are able to do that. And so I think this also correlates to offers because a lot of the time people will say, like, I have a module on this, well, I have a download on this, I have a PDF on this. And it's like, yeah, but if your audience doesn't learn that way, or if your customer or client doesn't need it in that way, shape, or form, it doesn't matter because they didn't get the message. Right? So it's like, to me, the equivalent of I'm playing a song where you're like, okay, well, I didn't hear it. So if I didn't hear it, it doesn't matter what the song was playing. I didn't hear it, so I can't do anything about it. So those lines for me were just like, again, they're such simple things, but they really were just like the essence, again, of like very simple mottos that you can live by that allow you to really easily understand these principles in the way that you can integrate them in their business. You guys know that I'm a pretty like quick thinking person. And as I'm here, we've been together for an hour and I am going to do a part 2 to this. I've decided in this moment as I'm recording, which is just how my brain works, I've decided I'm doing a part 2 to this because a couple reasons. Number one, I have genuinely like 17 more strategies and frameworks that I want to share with you that were so helpful for me. And I do not want to rush this. And I want to make sure that I can be the most thorough. And if that ends up being another hour episode, then so be it. That's what we're going to be doing. So with that being said, follow along for part 2. I'm going to record part 2 of this and do, probably knowing me, another hour of a riff on all of the frameworks and strategies that I learned, because there's so much more to unpack here. And I'm just literally over here scrolling through all of the different downloads. And I'm like, we've got customer journey. We've got the 4 different ways that people enter your world. We've got where you should be spending 90% of your energy in your business, the different ways that people share to give referrals and testimonials. And we've got the Christmas tree analogy of success. There's just so much that I need to unpack with you. And so I really believe in doing it right, not just doing it to do it. And because of that, we will be doing a part 2, and I'm going to wake up bright and early tomorrow and we're going to do a part 2 to this episode. So with that being said, you guys, I just want to thank you so much, by the way, for listening, for tuning in. I can't tell you enough how much, don't cry, Kate. I can't tell you enough how much your messages mean to me to get. And if you have questions, if even you're just like, hey, this really hit my heartstrings, or this is really what I'm going through, I just love to hear from you, and just know it just helps me so much to know how I can best support you. What's hitting home with you? What episodes or topics you're like, I loved this. I want more of whatever. Like, my DMs are always open. Shoot me a message on my account at Kate Perkovic on Instagram. If you want to message us on Ambitious, the podcast on Instagram, you can message us there as well. Just would love to connect with you and hear all of the downloads, and also what you've been integrating from the different episodes, and just how I can serve you better and what episodes and topics will be really helpful for you. So I just want to thank you so much for spending time with me today. And I know that this was a very on the whim, off the cuff decision to do a part 2, but it just feels like it's so absolutely necessary because there's just too much to share. And we need to make sure we go deep so you can take notes on this and integrate it into your business. Okay. So all that to be said, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, stay ambitious. We'll see you next week.